Hello and welcome to our Insights podcast. I'm Leon Herszon, your host for today. This podcast is sponsored by Value Edge Group. I have the pleasure of having with me my dear friend Jane Morgan. Welcome, Jane.
Thank you, Leon. Always great to chat with you.
All right. So last time we talked, you mentioned about how the world is becoming more upside down, volatile, unpredictable. Can you help us better understand, unpack the reality in practical terms for people living very interesting times, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been giving a lot of thought to this because it shows up in all aspects of our lives, right? And, everybody talks about the VUCA environment. And it's something that whenever we're doing any kind of trainings or anything to do with change, particularly, we talk about that volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous environment. But somehow it seems to be even more so, yeah? And just with political things that are going on and just, I think, the whole COVID, the pandemic, just changed things. It changed the way people work. It changed what people want. Businesses are not operating in quite the same way. A lot of people are working in a hybrid mode. A lot of people that were at home are now needing to go back in the office, and that's sort of changing the dynamic. And so actually there's another acronym that's coming into the world, or that people are more familiar with. I don't know if you've run into it, Leon, but it's called BANI. Are you familiar with that?
What is BANI?
BANI. I know it's not bunny, it's BANI. So BANI stands for Brittle, Anxious, Nonlinear, Incomprehensible.
Oh my, yeah.
I know. And it's someone called Jemais Cascio, who's a US anthropologist that coined that phrase a few years back. So it's not a new acronym. It's just that people are becoming more aware of it. So if you think about VUCA as being the external aspects, the external world that we're in, then BANI sort of describes our internal state. And that's why it's of interest to me, because a lot of the work that I'm doing, especially in the coaching space, it's always about the inner work that needs to happen to be able to operate in the world that we're in this VUCA world. And interestingly, I dug a little bit deeper into this. There's another guy, there was a really good article, and I'll share that article. Actually, we can share it with people afterwards. It's in Forbes magazine. And this article really basically says, a guy called Jerome, believe it's Brink, talked about the fact that, really all it is just reality, right? So it's about letting go of the illusions that we maybe had that we're in control, or that the world was predictable, or that we had knowledge. So it's not something new. It's just something that we're probably becoming more aware of, because the speed of change and the things that are going on have just intensified. And the inner journey is becoming more external for various reasons. I think people are they're more comfortable about talking about their inner state. And that's really true in the UK. The typical Britain that I grew up in before I went to the US, you didn't talk about how you felt, really. You certainly didn't see a therapist. And now people, and mental health, nobody talked about it, but people are talking about it now. And so, yeah, it's where we're at, and it's not going to go away. It's not going to slow down. And that inner journey we need to embrace it, really.
Yeah. I really like when you said the illusion of control. Right?
Well, we often think that we have control, and we do over certain things. And I mean, that's in coaching, when I'm working with people, and also in my own life, you really have to distinguish between what is it that I can control, which is usually my response to things, versus what can I not control? And in large organizations, that question takes on an even a different level as well, because in large organizations, we often have less direct control over how things are going. And we have to decide, do we put all our energy trying to change the processes that we don't agree with? Or do we focus on the bits that we can? So yeah, it's this idea of really distinguishing and focusing, if you like, on the things that we can control, which is working with that inner state, with that, if you like, that BANI state that I just talked about.
And for our viewers and listeners here, so Jane Morgan is a very accomplished coach. You're coaching executives, project managers, professionals overall. And actually, strongly recommend you guys to get in contact with Jane about coaching sessions. But in your coaching sessions, right, you've been talking with people all over the world in different positions and things like that. What would you say are the most common emotional reactions you are seeing with people? Because we just talked about VUCA, BANI. You have the external elements, you have the internal elements. How people are trying to cope with that such level of uncertainty. You mentioned the pandemic, and then you have AI, and people are afraid, others are embracing. Yeah. What are those ways that people are coping?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really great question, actually, because I think it's a lot about what shows up on the outside, right? So what's happening on the inside doesn't necessarily show up on the outside. And so what we're really looking at, what I see, and this is, it's anecdotal to a certain degree, but, I have been coaching now for 15 years. So I've sort of seen a trend towards more, not necessarily more anxiety, but more willingness to bring the discussions around anxiety, burnout, that kind of thing, into the coaching space. And so more and more, I'm working with people that are recognizing that they might be on the path to burnout, or interestingly, they've had a burnout and they don't want to fall back into it. So they're actually they're looking for ways to try to stay ahead of the curve. And so usually, we become anxious, if you like, destabilized when various things are happening, but it often is a lack of control of events. It might be a lack of control of what's happening in a business. It obviously, we're not just people at work. We're talking coaching about coaching the whole person. So, these things don't just show up in the workplace, and people are often, if there's instability in more than one area, then obviously everything's exacerbated. So worry, anxiety, these are the terms that people use. A sense of maybe not necessarily always being sure of either the direction of the business or where they will go, and also wanting to take more control, interestingly. So rather than just sort of let everything happen around them or to them, people want to be able to have more control over what happens to them, over their choices, over how they choose to respond to things, but over their practical choices. Where do they see themselves in 5 years? What do they need to do to get to that place in 5 years? How do they manage where they are now so that they are optimized in their work, but also in how they feel? So the naming conventions vary, and of course, not everybody shows up with issues. It's not like queue up with a number for the doctor's surgery. It's not that. But if I look at all the many people, and I've well over 4,000 hours now of coaching under my belt. You just look, you can start to see themes and trends. And I can definitely see that with everything that's going on in the world at the moment, and not to get political in any way, or because it's all over the world, that there is more going on. It is affecting people, and in a really positive way, people are starting to name it, and that is very powerful.
So would you say that naming that anxiety and the reasons for that, or the uncertainty, it's a cope mechanism that people are finding useful?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, in fact, there's a really good author called Dan Siegel. He came up with the term "name it to tame it," and there is something about naming something, putting a name on a feeling, on what's going on, and that then allows you to look at it and analyze it, and look at it from all angles. And if you think about it, often for kids, right, in the early years, or even as part of therapy with kids, they may be given pictures of expressions or feelings, happy, sad, or whatever, and those will be that will help them name what it is that they feel. So we've always used that. And also I used to do, I don't know if I told you this the last time, but I used to, when I lived in California, I used to do some volunteering work in the state prison system.
Very nice.
And so we used to also have not necessarily words that would describe the feelings, but pictures, photos that would describe emotions. And those would be on the floor during this activity, and then people would pick up the emotion, the face that would best describe the emotion that they were feeling. And how I see it play out in very practical ways now, for example, with teams or in meetings, and I use this a lot in trainings, like on the second day, maybe, just give me one word as to how you're feeling and be really honest about it. So if you're feeling tired, say, I'm tired. If you're feeling energized, feeling excited, bored, whatever you are, like name it. And there's a lot of power in being able to name something. Yes. Put a name to it. And then, and there's we can talk more about some of the other techniques, but what it does is it kind of creates this gap or this pause. And that pause then allows us to make different decisions and to act differently, potentially, to say different things.
Yeah, I think when you have a problem, the first step is to recognize you have a problem, and that's what you're saying, name the problem, right?
Yeah.
So under those 4,000 hours... sorry, go ahead.
No, so it isn't just necessarily naming a problem. That's really important too. It's just naming the feeling. Because you can actually, or naming the problem, but like this is happening, this decision was made and I feel something, but what is it? Oh, I feel irritation or whatever. But equally, naming something positive. This change has occurred and I feel, what do I feel? I feel hopeful. I feel excited. So it isn't just for naming problems and issues. There's a lot of power in claiming it.
Nice. Thank you. So under your 4,000 hours of coaching and talking to all those people sharing with you, what do you think is the number one cope mechanism that you see people using to deal? Because there are so many different ones. I can share a little bit. I think in my perspective, I try to find a balance between work, sports, and family, spiritual. Try to find a balance, because one thing that I found is that every time you emphasize too much one side, doesn't matter which one it is, the others will suffer somehow.
Yeah.
Right. So I try to find this balance. How in your experience talking with all those people, what is the number one cope mechanism that people use?
Well, it's a really good question, in the sense that people have coping mechanisms. What they might come in with, though, and what they might walk out with might be two different things. So I love your coping mechanism, if you like, and this idea of balance. And I think the last time I talked to you, we talked about this idea of a stool, a three-legged stool. So the stool, one leg is work, one leg's home, family, other people, commitments, and the other one is self, is personal. So it could be sport, exercise, meditation, reading, whatever it is, singing, whatever. So those three legs of a stool, right? And so keeping those in balance, absolutely. I think if I pull it back a notch, the overarching tool that I try to get people to connect with, if they're not already doing. So I might say to them, what is it, how do you get that balance? And they may not have a mechanism as you do. But if they do, then it's like, okay, so let's deconstruct that. But if I look at the theme, it's all really about the simple aspects of emotional intelligence, which are self-awareness. It all starts with self-awareness. Empathy, which is really looking outwards and looking out to what's, the other person's perspective or what else might be going on out there, and self-regulation. So this self-awareness and self-regulation aspects of emotional intelligence are always at play in whatever tool people adopt. So if they don't have tools, then, or they don't have consistent tools, then I'll always ask and say, can you think of any others, and what could you do? Because obviously coaching, the kind of coaching I do, isn't, okay, Leon, sit down, right, let me fix you.
Yeah, exactly. It's more, here's the recipe, just follow this.
Just do this and you'll be fine. It's more like, okay, so how do you create that balance? What are you lacking in your will? I might be lacking balance, it's slightly off. Okay, so what can you do to get back into that space? And so this idea of self-awareness, for me, is key. So if you bring it back to this BANI idea, or this idea of this internal state, this internal state is going to be there whether we recognize it or not. So the naming is one mechanism. I also use this idea of, I call it catching butterflies. There was a guy called David Bellamy, who was like a botanist in the UK, and he used to have these television programs where he'd go around with a net, kind of catching these creatures. And so one mechanism is to, as soon as you catch or notice, that's the power, and that's where the power is. And the reason I like the butterfly idea is that it's something beautiful, isn't it?
Yes.
So often if we catch ourselves doing something like, I'm working too long, I'm not doing this, it's very negative, it's very heavy. And when we're in a place of self-criticism, it's not a good place to make change from. However, if it's something beautiful or interesting, we're more likely to get curious. And so I always say, imagine this butterfly that you've caught in your hand, get curious about it. Where does it come from? So, and part of it will be naming it. What is it? Yeah. What is it that I'm feeling? And what is this emotion trying to tell me? Yeah. All of the notion of labeling or gathering information, all of that allows us to have a pause. And it's the same kind of pause that you see in meditation and spiritual practices. Because
yes, I see
do you see the parallel?
Yes.
Yeah. And so whatever we do, there's the ABC, there's acknowledge, breathe, choose. There's so many of these things, but they're all tied back to self-awareness. And one thing I think since the last time you and I talked that I've been pursuing more is the notion of somatics, is the body keeps score. The body, the emotion will be in the body somewhere. So where is it in the body? Is it in my head? Is it in my chest? Is it in my stomach? And maybe what color would I give it? And
wow, that's interesting.
yeah, and usually if it's a negative emotion, it'll get, you know, a black or a dark color or something. And then I'm also trained in NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, and I do use some techniques to help people kind of transmute or transform those feelings, those colors, and lighten them, and then they can take those activities. So there are at times techniques that I will share and give. And then sometimes if I'm just starting to work with people and they're not that connected to their feelings, or they've never really thought about them in the body, their homework, quote unquote, or their call to action is to just go off and start to notice. How do I react in those pressured situations? And how do I react in those really good situations? So it's not focusing on the negative. It's just becoming more aware. And people that are already doing it, and I'm sure a lot of people that are listening or watching, you have your own practices, right? And maybe you just don't know, or maybe you do know, that they belong in that sort of category of self-awareness. And so for me, whenever I develop any kind of leadership program, which is more training, it's not coaching really, I will always have the lens of emotional intelligence as the starting point. Self-awareness, empathy, and self-regulation, because you can't begin to go to empathy until you are really clear about where you are with things. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So is that the main emotional intelligence technique that you use doing your coaching work?
Yeah, I mean, that is the framework. I would call that the framework.
A framework, yeah.
Yeah, but the tools vary. So another big one, again, it's the self-awareness bit that tends to be the bit that needs work. So the butterfly idea is just one. The pausing, any kind of pause, naming, choosing, that's another technique. 4-7-8 breathing is a technique that I practice every day, and I suggest to people I'm coaching, would they like to take that on? So 4 breaths in, hold for 7, out for 8. That's simply kind of calming our nervous system, because really what we're getting at is this idea that when we're triggered by whatever it is, by the VUCA world, our limbic system takes over. Yeah. And that's where we're in the fight, flight, flock, freeze type of space. The
amygdala hijack.
The amygdala hijack, exactly. And so what we're trying to do through the techniques is to soothe or calm that amygdala response. And I'm getting in at the moment to Mel Robbins' stuff. And I'm just finishing her book. It's called Let Them. And that's another technique, of just if somebody's doing something you don't like, you let them. And that let them is a way of calming the nervous system. And there's another part to the technique, which is let me. So I think let them is very much around the kind of self-awareness, empathy space. And the self-regulation is, okay, now from this space where I'm more calmed, let me make different decisions about how I want to respond. Yeah?
Yeah, very nice. I recently read a book. I cannot remember the name of the author, A Relaxation Revolution. And it talks about the breathing, the relaxation, and how it helped with so many of the issues that people, health issues like high blood pressure and all kind of different things. and the power that it is when you
Yeah.
do the breathing, when you relax and things like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can relate to that. It makes a lot of difference on a day by day.
Yeah, and it is, I think the day by day is the key. So whatever practices, when, I love to find out other people's practices, but what's probably consistent around people that have practices is they are practices. They're not just, oh, I'm in a stress situation, I'm going to start to breathe. That it's, you do it every day. And one of the
Yeah.
reasons I like Andrew Wells 478 is because it's quick. And something I found, working especially with senior execs is, they don't necessarily want to load themselves up with a 20-minute meditation. But pretty much anyone can breathe,
Yes,
four
we better,
times.
right?
4 breaths in, hold for 7, out for 8, do it 4 times. I mean, it's not that hard. And so I do that every day too. And so when people do whatever it is, yoga, whatever, there is a link, as you're saying, with the physiology. So interestingly, it isn't just our mental state, but it is literally our blood pressure goes down,
Yeah.
cholesterol goes down. I mean, I'm not in any way medically trained or even an engineer, for example, but I can tell that even just personally, my stats have changed over the last 25 years because of some of these practices. So I don't have a one size fits all really.
Hmm.
Well, in my work, I am up for whatever people want to bring, but just have a practice, right? Because again, this BANI state is there in response to the VUCA world. And to link it all back together, the emotional intelligence, the self-awareness part of it, is the way to get in. I hesitate to use the word in control of that inner state, but to calm that inner state, to then make better decisions, whatever they might be.
Yeah, I think you just answer my next question. Why emotional intelligence is so critical in our environment today, right?
Yeah,
Maybe more now than ever because of all that we are seeing.
yeah.
And I hear a lot of people anxious about AI, for instance. I've been writing about that. I'm reading a lot about that and sharing some knowledge on
Mm.
this area. But I see a good level of anxiety
Yeah, that's a really good
of the
point.
future, right?
It is. It's like, AI is a really interesting one because that surprisingly doesn't come up as much in coaching as I would have thought.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, that's not what people bring to coaching sessions. It's a lot more around the people aspect of things. But I do believe. I mean, just from generally information that's out there and studies and things, that this AI revolution, while it's bringing a lot of really good things, it is also creating a sense of what will the future hold.
Yeah.
And so this sense of, and there's a lot going on in the world, isn't there? I mean, there's a lot of unrest. There's a lot of stuff politically that's happening. There's a lot of war, so there's a lot of stuff going on that just is sort of destabilizing at a societal level. And, we should never rely on others to fix us anyway. So I suppose what I like about emotional intelligence, and of course Daniel Goleman, sort of the founder of it, it all started there. People are much more aware of it now. And so it is much more needed. And it's also much more valued. And if you remember that PMI did a study, I think it was back in 2022, where they conducted a study of something like 5,000 project managers around the skills that they need. And then they published the report in 2023, and it was around the fact that it's the power skills, how important the
Power
power
skills.
skills are.
I think it was the Pulse of the Profession that they published.
It's the pulse of the profession. That's exactly it. That particular one was on that. So what it's done is it's raised the profile of, and rather than soft skill, which sounds, like it's not that important, power skill. People are using that word.
You have power in the name.
You have power in the name. It's all in the name, and language. So neuro-linguistic programming, there is something about language and the effect of that on us. And we talked the last time about, I have this background in language and translation. So I'm curious, always curious about the power of language. And so, yes, it's great to see this resurgence, if you like, or not resurgence, but the emergence of things like emotional intelligence. They're more well understood. I notice that when I'm doing trainings, people typically know what it is. I'm going to be doing a webinar in a couple of weeks on this. And, people, if you say to people, what's emotional intelligence, most people can come up with some kind of definition now. So I think all of this is saying that these power skills, including emotional intelligence, or emotional intelligence for me, is the mechanism that you can use and leverage all the other skills through. It's not going anywhere. And in fact, if anything, it's going up. People are recognizing the need more, and they're also more willing to say they need it. So that's back to that original thing in the beginning, where I said people are more willing to talk about these kinds of things.
Yeah, I can also again relate to that. I recently was talking about managing stakeholders, and the center of the entire discussion was about relationships.
Yeah.
It's not about the techniques, so it's about human to human. It's the relationship, as you mentioned, emotional intelligence, the listening, right? Not the hearing, but the listening. To talk with your heart. There's so many aspects. So thank you for sharing that. That's really nice.
And something to say, just to piggyback on that. What you're saying is why people can do, for example, a soft skills or power skills course more than once. And I always say, when I'm doing leadership programs, meet this content wherever you are on your journey. Because I could hear about listening 5 years ago and hear it and connect with it in a completely different way than I would now. Whereas technical tools, they're more binary, aren't they? You've got the knowledge. Maybe it could be about application. But these things like emotional intelligence, that's why we can develop them further. And the more we revisit them, the more I teach sessions that involve simple listening, the more it connects me to listening. So it never gets old. It might seem like been there, done that, but we haven't really. For me, it's a spiral journey. Every time I touch it or you touch this stuff, we get a little bit something extra from it.
And we need reminders, right? Because sometimes the day by day, we just get so involved and we don't remember, we have to have some time for us, right?
Exactly. And, we say in coaching, you coach the whole person. And so this is it. It's like whatever we do is going to have impact in our projects, in our teams, in our organization, and in our personal life with our friends. You almost, you can't lose if you focus on stuff like this. As long as you don't start lecturing people and being irritating.
So you mentioned several techniques and practices. What is one that you would recommend? If you want to recommend one practice that people can use, our viewers, our listeners here can use right now to help them better respond? Would that be the 478? What is the one that you would recommend when I'm overwhelmed now? What would you recommend?
Yeah, so I think it's a combination. So first of all, it's to notice it. Yes. So, and sometimes you only notice it when you're in the middle of it, or sometimes you realize it afterwards. Yeah. That's the butterfly. So it's like catch it as soon as you notice it. And then that creates a natural pause. Just notice it. And then name it. Say, what am I feeling? What is it, that feeling? You're not saying this out loud, and it's happening in a split second. Mm-hmm. But the noticing is the first step. So it's noticing, then naming it. And then if it might not be possible in the moment, but then like, what is that emotion trying to tell me? What is it that I need to get from this? Do something differently, etc. So the labeling will create the space. And also not to stress if you don't notice it until afterwards. You get better and better and quicker and quicker. And I think that for me, that's been the big difference in me personally. I notice much earlier and much quicker. Ah, yes, that's irritation. That's joy. That's, sadness. That's hope. And you catch it. So catch it like a butterfly, hold it for a second, see if it, what it is would be a good place to start.
All right. So identifying, naming, and how you're going to respond to
Exactly.
that.
So it's pause, naming, and choosing is really what it is. But your people are going to remember the butterfly, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah. That's a very powerful analogy. Thank you.
Like, there it is. Oh, and therefore light with a smile. It's not like, oh, there it is. It's like, oh, there it is.
Got you.
Yeah. And then curiosity. What's this about? So no judgment, really. I mean, these are not my ideas. I suppose the butterfly ideas probably is, but the notion of catching something and holding it without judgment, that's an ancient idea, isn't it?
Very nice. Now let's look to a leader. We're talking about us as individuals, so now our struggles and our challenges on a day by day. What can leaders apply those emotional intelligence techniques to navigate changes and actually help a team without burning out?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key, isn't it? I think when we're talking about, so this is the distinction I see between projects that tend to have a deliverable, they tend to be quicker, and therefore, and not necessarily about transformational change. They're simply about delivering something. That's a different matter from delivering transformational change. A global rollout of something, lots of people, takes time, etc. A lot of visibility and very strategic. So those elements, first of all, it's much longer, which means that the leaders need to sort of hold that space for longer. And they'll often, especially if it's a change that potentially involves some negative consequences for people, they're under a lot of pressure. So what's important is to be able to be connected to themselves. Yeah. And I've given different presentations over the years on change around this idea that we need to not forget what it feels like to go through change. And we need to be connected to ourselves. So the more aware, the more self-aware a leader is of their own emotions, the more likely they are to have empathy for other people's. The more they remember what it's like to go through change, the more likely they are to then be able to support people through change. and to do simple things like the one I mentioned earlier at the beginning of a team meeting. How are you feeling today, Leon? You know, in one sentence, say what's going through your mind. Yeah. So it's some little techniques, but it's also modeling. It's modeling that it's making it okay to talk about things. It's obviously creating, the right environment for these, for programs to happen. But people always follow the leader. I mean, it's not just a kid's game. So the environment that we create. So if there's this feeling of we've got to get to the end of it and drive, and there's no humanity in it, then that is the energy that will be in that program. But if there's time and realizing, you talked about stakeholders. I always find it interesting. You've probably noticed this too, that if you ask people, who are your stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders in this project? They often don't name themselves.
Right.
Do you know? The project manager, the project team, the sponsor. No, it's customers, suppliers, SMEs. You're a stakeholder. I'm a stakeholder. So acknowledging that we are all stakeholders impacted by and can impact a project or program is really super, super important. So being able to name stuff and primarily to model how we want others to be, people will follow what we do, not what we say. It's like parenting, only obviously, it's parenting the program and making it safe to tell the real truth of the program.
Yeah, thank you, Jane, for sharing that. Before I let you go, let me ask you this. One or two books or references, authors that you read or that you follow that were instrumental for you, that you would like to recommend to our viewers and listeners today?
Yeah, so I've probably named most of them as I've gone along. So here they all are, kind of in one go. As I said, at the moment, I'm quite into Mel Robbins stuff, and I've been. She's been in my periphery for a long time. What I like is I look for books and things that support what it is that I'm trying to do. So the Let Them book, The 5-Second Rule by Mel Robbins, I'm almost at the end of that book. And so has it influenced me in the last month? Yeah, it has. In a way that it supports what I have been doing for a long time. Someone I have been following for a while is Susan David. So she coined the phrase emotional agility. This idea that we move through emotion, not to resist it. So she's got a Harvard person and neuroscientist, and got a podcasts and lots of resources there. One that really set me on the journey to this noticing awareness is Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now, which is not a book. The Power of Now. We don't often think about that in a business context, but that really got me into this space of personally, and also getting the people that I work with to be present to now. Yeah. There's also Cheryl Paul is another one. She's got a book called The Wisdom of Anxiety, which is very good. And the kind of clues in the words, the wisdom of anxiety. So it's sort of saying, just as I was saying before, what's the feeling trying to tell me or teach me? There's an intelligence in anxiety. There's an emotional signal. And then anything by Dan Siegel as well, the guy that the Name It to Tame It guy.
Here you go.
And
we
Daniel
have several
Goleman.
References.
Daniel Goleman, always on my list.
I know it's hard to choose just a few, right?
Those are just a few.
Thank you for sharing that. And last words here for our viewers. What would you like to say to our viewers and listeners before we finish?
Well, just thank you for spending time here with us in the now. And go catch a few butterflies.
All right. Thank you. Jane, always a pleasure speaking with you. I really appreciate you sharing that. And anybody who is listening wants to know more, Jane Morgan, you can search her on LinkedIn. And if you need more information, just connect with us. So thank you very much again, Jane. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Leon. Always a pleasure.